Let's talk about Hallmark Christmas movies. Now, I know this is a controversial subject. People have strongly divided opinions on this. To some people, Hallmark Christmas movies are a source of comfort and joy, a way to get yourself into the mood of the holiday season. To other people, they are, bad movies. I don't know how to say that any other way. I'm sorry. In my own family, my wife, Kim, really enjoys Hallmark Christmas movies. She watches them relatively frequently this time of year. The rest of us, we love Kim. And so we are supportive of this part of her life. And we've learned that it is best not to comment on the quality of the movies themselves. Anyway, y'all do know what I'm talking about, right? These movies, they're on TV just about 24 hours a day. This time of year, there's actually a whole channel dedicated to them. And they all have the same basic plot where a high-achieving New York woman goes back to visit her hometown, small town, a place where the local economy and culture is weirdly entirely built around Christmas. And she runs into some guy who she hasn't seen since high school. And this guy, who is, of course, an absolute dreamboat, the hunkiest guy who you will ever meet. He came home after college, and he came home to help run the family Christmas tree farm or the family Christmas cookie shop, which is somehow profitable, even though they only get like 3 weeks of business every year. I would love to see their business plan. Anyway, not the point. These movies are lovely, maybe not my cup of tea, but I will also admit that more than once, when my wife has been watching one of these while folding laundry or doing something, that I've gotten sucked in and watched along with her, at least partly because I find it hilarious that they all take place in towns with names like Christmasville, Ohio, or Ewell, Pennsylvania. But again, not the point. My point is that these movies do well, they are successful, people love them so much, because they paint a picture of the perfect Christmas. Finding love on Christmas Eve, getting the perfect present that is not about money, but that is instead about being seen and loved and known, saving the town Christmas ornament store from the evil corporation that's trying to bulldoze it and build a mall. Whatever the particular plot point of any one of these movies is, they always end up with Christmas being saved, with a sweet and sentimental moment when Christmas is just the way it's supposed to be, when the lights sparkle and that cup of hot cocoa hits just right, and everyone realizes their Christmas dreams and feels the warmth and joy that comes with knowing the true meaning of the season. And I've been told and have seen for myself over the last several weeks that living in Williamsburg in December is a little bit like living inside a Hallmark Christmas movie. There's the ice skating rink on Dog Street. There's the grand illumination in colonial Williamsburg. There's beautiful Christmas lights all over town. Heck, there is an actual place called Christmastown at Busch Gardens. Goodness, we here at this church, we put on this massive and incredible performance of the Messiah every year that seems to be the unofficial kickoff of the holiday season for so many people in this town. Guys, I got to tell you, those are all plot points from a Hallmark Christmas movie. All we need is a 30-something New York marketing executive coming home to help save the family candy cane store. And this is something that people would watch for 2 hours in mid-December. Imagine the scene where the couple is ice skating and they fall in love as they're ice skating as people in colonial clothes walk by, right? Like, I am telling y'all, this thing writes itself. Anyway, beyond my idea for a Williamsburg-themed Hallmark Christmas movie, and if one of you ever writes that script, I expect a credit and a share of the profits for coming up with that idea. But beyond that, my point is that part of the selling point for these movies is that many of us long for the so-called perfect Christmas. Let me be clear. I am not saying that Hallmark Christmas movies are bad. If they make you happy, I love that for you. We need more sources of happiness in this world. And by the way, one of my favorite Christmas movies is Die Hard, so I am not exactly a pillar of good taste when it comes to Christmas movies. I'm just saying that Hallmark Christmas movies are based on the idea that we can achieve, that we deserve the so-called perfect Christmas. We have been told, largely by advertisers who are trying to sell us stuff, we have been told that there is a perfect Christmas experience out there, that the holidays are meant to be warm and fuzzy, that they should always feel good, that this time of year is the time when everything is supposed to go right, and there will always be harmony and peace and hope and joy. But here's the thing. Even for those of us who live in our very own Christmasville, USA, here in Williamsburg, we know that there is no such thing as a perfect Christmas. Treasured ornaments break. Schedules get busy. We find ourselves tired or worn thin. Travel plans get messed up by the weather. The family gets together and then they start fighting. Maybe we're far away from home and our work schedule does not allow us to go back home for the holidays. Maybe family members are missing from our celebrations, either because they've got too much going on and they can't make it this year, or there's a difficult family situation, or maybe because they've died. Maybe the presents didn't arrive. Maybe the present we thought was perfect ends up disappointing the person to whom we gave it. Maybe everyone gets so focused on the stuff that we are giving and getting that we forget to pay attention to the people. There are a million things that can go wrong this time of year because that's how life works. That's how people work. There is rarely that perfect moment when the flurries are falling and the lights are twinkling and everyone has realized the true meaning of Christmas right as the clock strikes midnight on December 24th and everything is perfectly peaceful. There are all these voices out there telling us that the holidays are supposed to be perfect, that it's our job to make them perfect. The reality is that is pretty much impossible. We seem to be striving for the perfect Christmas. But of course, even the first Christmas was far from perfect. It was not a Hallmark movie. For the people who lived it, it does not seem that everything went right. Think about the story that we read today. Think about the first Christmas from Joseph's perspective. He's got a plan for his life. He's about to get married. He's about to jump into a new and exciting season. But all of a sudden, he discovers that his wife-to-be is pregnant, and he knows the baby isn't his. And sure, people in the ancient world did not have access to modern medicine, but they had a pretty clear idea of how babies are made. So Joseph has got to be feeling crushed, blindsided, betrayed. And no matter how many times Mary says, Joseph, I promise, I have not been unfaithful. This is God's baby. I mean, that sounds absolutely crazy, right? It must have seemed like nonsense. Of course, Joseph doesn't believe it. So he plans to end their relationship quietly. He doesn't want to expose her to public shame, but he also understandably feels like he just can't trust her anymore. But then something happens. Joseph has a dream, and in the dream, he hears God speaking to him through an angel, telling him that actually this is God's child, that this child really is a gift of the Holy Spirit, that Mary has been telling the truth. And that's enough for Joseph. It's worth naming that we often forget just how radically faithful Joseph is. Joseph turns his whole life upside down over what he hears from God in a dream. It would have been easier just to walk away, to let Mary deal with this on her own. Staying with Mary meant a lifetime of whispers and people laughing at him when they don't think he's looking. You know that's not really Joseph's kid, right? Can you believe what a sucker that guy is? Can you believe that he bought that story that Mary sold him about how the kid's from God? It meant a life of risk, a life of danger. Within a few years, Joseph and Mary and Jesus will be refugees on the run from violent political authorities who want to kill them, they'll be desperate for a place to hide from forces who are out for their blood. It meant a life of heartache when prophets like Simeon and Anna foretold the odd mix of hope and grief that Jesus would bring for those who love him. It's a life of unimaginably challenging work, raising a kid who is both a human being and God in the flesh. How exactly does one potty train the Son of God? What does it mean to be the human father to the one in whom and through whom the whole universe is created? Joseph stepped into that. He took the leap of faith. He answered when God called. He followed where God led, even when he did not know where it would take him. But I'm just saying, I'm pretty sure it didn't feel perfect at the time. It didn't feel like the way he had planned for, maybe wanted things to go. But that, I think, is exactly the point. The story we tell this time of year, the story of Advent and of Christmas, is a story of a God who shows up precisely in the imperfections. We worship a God who is not confined to spotless temples or the golden streets of heaven. Our God shows up in the pain of a marriage that seems to be falling apart before it's even begun. Our God is at work in the disorientation of an unplanned, impossible-seeming pregnancy. Our God is working for good through the life of someone who is struggling to be faithful even when what's happening to them doesn't make any sense. Our God is born among us in the mess of the manger, through a couple of poor kids who are far from home without a proper place to stay, surrounded by dirty, stinking animals. And of course, that's not the end of the imperfections. Our God chooses to be among us as one of the oppressed, someone who shares his table with outcasts and rebels and collaborators and sinners, who knows what it means to go hungry, who refuses to return violence for violence, who is hunted by the authorities and despised by the religious elites and betrayed by his own friends and closest followers. Our God chooses in Jesus Christ to live a life of faithful love even when it leads to his own death. None of that sounds perfect, at least not in the way that we tend to define perfect in our own lives. None of that sounds like it would fit in a Hallmark movie. But it turns out that it is precisely in the imperfections, in the complicated parts, in the messy parts. It's precisely in the pain and the hurt and the loss and the uncertainty and the brokenness that God shows up. Joseph, in today's story, violates social conventions. Choosing to stay with a woman who was having someone else's kid was unimaginable in his culture. He chooses to violate social conventions for the sake of faithfulness and love. And through his act of boundary-breaking, faithful love, he gets to play a part in the work of God being born into our world. Joseph doesn't have the whole story at this point. God only tells him enough to enable him to take his next faithful step. Following Jesus, something that Joseph and Mary are doing before Jesus is even born. Following Jesus doesn't mean that we will have all the answers. God doesn't show us how everything will work out. God gives us just enough to enable us to take our next faithful step, to keep on going on the journey of faith and love in Jesus Christ. God, it seems God tends to be at work in places and situations that are far less perfect than we might want for them to be. So if your life feels like the opposite of a Hallmark Christmas movie, if your life feels overwhelming and uncertain, if you are worried that all your best laid Christmas plans are about to go up in smoke, well, it sounds like you might just have a lot in common with Joseph, with Mary, with the folks who experienced that first Christmas. It sounds like your life is the kind of place where God might just yet again show up and bring perfect love in imperfect circumstances, bring perfect grace to imperfect people. You do not need to be a high-powered lawyer finding love in Christmasville, USA. That is a Hallmark Christmas movie joke. I'm bringing it back to the beginning here. You do not need to live your own Hallmark Christmas movie in order to have the perfect Christmas. The perfect Christmas, it turns out, is found precisely in the midst of imperfections. The love of Jesus shows up to precisely the people who do not know how to take their next step. The good news of God's great joy is delivered first and foremost to those whose lives have been turned upside down. That is, I think, part of what we mean when we call Jesus Emmanuel, God with us. Jesus is the God who is with us in the mess. Jesus is the God who has chosen to be with us in our real lives as they really are. Jesus is the God who knows what it means to live in a world that is less than perfect, in which our dreams do not always come true, in which our plans often seem to fall apart. Jesus is the God who knows, who sees, who walks with us through all the moments when we feel lost and lonely and overwhelmed and unsure. As we approach Christmas, and you think about what you're looking for this season, I hope you will take some time to appreciate all the little imperfections. And remember that those imperfect moments are an essential part of God's story. They are an essential part of how Jesus comes to us. When the ornament breaks, when Christmas dinner falls on the floor and gets eaten by the dog, when your plans fall apart and you're struggling to connect, might you ask, where is Jesus even in this? Thank God for the imperfections. Thank God that life is more interesting and more beautiful than any Hallmark Christmas movie. Thank God that Jesus Christ is God with us, God for us, God as one of us, God gracing us with love, precisely when things are less than perfect. Thanks be to God. Amen.